So there's a question from Neeraj, how to ensure that AI practitioners get a comprehensive understanding of the practical and moral sides of process involving people, data, and computation conceived as a socio-technical system.
Thank you so much for that question. I think it really is about building that ethical consciousness. And one of the things that I always say is that AI is a new language and is the language that we will be communicating in as we move deeper and deeper into the future. So we've got to build that AI literacy by ensuring now from an early age or the earliest age as possible that we start to build ethical resilience, because many of our children only know technology. Many of them will only know algorithms. And we have got to ensure for us to really develop the kind of legacy we want with this technology, and to ensure that this technology is deployed in a manner that is equitable and in a manner that embraces diversity and respects inclusion, and for us to really understand the long-term impacts of AI or data on society. We've got to bring that ethical approach, I think, from the minute a child is born. So it's about ethical resilience, it's about vigilance, it's about duty of care, and it's about due process. And we cannot sacrifice any of these as we design the technology. So while there may be technological applications or interventions that we can use to look at bias in the numbers, it's more than the numbers.
Mm.
It's about the consciousness. It's about the mentality. It's about the approach. And this is where we need to build that extra resilience so we can combine the consciousness and the computation and really develop the kind of technology that we can be proud of.
Absolutely. I think I'm in complete agreement to you. I hope that answered Neeraj's question. The next one is from Vibhav. He says, how do we deal with AI that already has biases?
Well, we deal with that by understanding that we have got to articulate that. We can't overpromise with the technology. And we have seen that in the criminal justice system. Many of these algorithmic decision-making systems overpromising. And we're seeing sometimes that a lot of the vendors who create these algorithms also being part of that deception by not stepping up and saying, this is what the technology cannot do, or these are the disclaimers that you need to provide, or bringing a multidisciplinary and interdisciplinary approach in the design space. So including the criminologists and the criminal psychologists and individuals who are working in the criminal justice space. So some of those challenges will not be replicated. So if it's already there, I think we've just got to be courageous and say, this is what we have, this is what works, this is what doesn't work, and there must be a process for redress if it harms someone. We must have that process and to ensure that it works to the best of its ability. And an algorithm is never going to be perfect because we are imperfect and it is designed by us. But we certainly can have the rules and the regulations and the respect for that rights-based approach that lets us know if something goes wrong, there's a requisite level of enforcement to correct that and to ensure that when we go back to the design space, we can enhance the product, the process, the program that we're creating with these algorithms to ensure we deliver something that is enhanced.
Definitely. I think, as you mentioned in your talk as well about auditing the systems and interrogating the algorithms that we are building is going to really build the trust into our systems. The next question is from Karen. Renee, I agree with you all that you say. Can you give us a real life example of the adverse effect of AI?
Well, a real life example would be you have an individual who has served 15 years in prison, who has had 15 years of good behavior, who is an exemplary citizen, who is ready to return to society, who, while being incarcerated, acquired really extraordinary amount of education, as well as been an exemplar in the criminal justice system, who is ready for parole and continues to be denied parole until he realizes it's the risk assessment tool and those criminogenic socioeconomic factors such as education history, whether or not I own a cell phone, if I live in a community that has high crime rates, if my family owns property or they don't own property. So when we create systems And these proxies for race and discrimination and bias slip in as data points, then what we do is we undermine an individual's right to freedom. And we've got to think about that. So, this is why I always say criminal justice should be the conscience of artificial intelligence. And I always say, as an AI ethicist and a data activist, I see myself as the conscience as well of the data scientist. So we have seen it. We have seen wrongful arrest by facial recognition technologies. We are seeing in the criminal justice system as well geolocation warrants, where the police can actually do a sweep of the data in a particular space. And just like that, because your data was recognized in a geographic location, you become a person of interest to the police. And we're seeing that the police no longer needs reasonable suspicion to deploy an algorithm to delve deep into your background or into your life. And before you know it, you are a person of interest to the police. And you could be arrested in that digital space and not know it until the police call you in. So we are seeing, particularly when it comes to the risks of big data policing or the risks of algorithmic decision-making system in, sentencing process or in corrections, where we've seen it in public benefits, where families have been denied benefits, healthcare benefits, children being taken from their parents in the child protection system and put into foster care because of an algorithm. And we've got to think about that, because you may find a social service provider saying to a family, it's just a glitch. Or you may find a producer of a product saying to a consumer, well, it was a glitch in the system. But we don't know how much money that individual may have in their account. We don't know if that glitch in the system took the last, the savings. We don't know what it is. So we've got to really be diligent, extremely diligent about the algorithms we design, how they're deployed, and the kinds of long-term impacts and short-term impacts they could have as well. So, the information is out there. I think for a lot of people, it really hasn't hit home yet to really understand how devastating it could be.
I think this just gave me goosebumps, I would say, because the effect it has had on people, and especially people can now relate to the real life examples. I have a couple more questions. Some I will cover, some I will let you allow and answer on the chat. Yeah. So we have got from Marcus, are there any existing ethical frameworks that could be used as a straw man or baseline?
There are many ethical frameworks that are out there. There are frameworks just in general. There are frameworks that look at specific applications in different professions. There are frameworks that build professional identity in the use of algorithms that look at professional conduct. There are many, from organizations such as the United Nations and UNESCO to companies that release ethical frameworks as well. So there's a plethora out there. The challenge is that some of the greatest perpetrators of an ethical behavior are some of the same entities and agencies that are designing the ethical framework. So it turns into ethical theater, where individuals are acting ethically as opposed to being ethical and committed to an ethical organizational culture or ethical design. So it's not about the frameworks, but it's about the courage to do the right thing once we have the framework. And that's where we stand, I think, at this moment in AI. It's about more than, we need to be more authentic in the ways in which we look at ethical AI.
I think very beautifully put, Renee. I'll go to the next question as well. How do we get more diverse persons to come forward or to be included and contribute to the development of AI systems?
Well, I think what we've got to do is democratize that whole concept of data. We've got to bring a particular kind of understanding to data. I think most people don't talk about data because it's not something they can see. Most people don't realize from the minute that they are using any kind of technology, given the Internet of Things, that a data profile has already been created about you. It's a data profile that's been used, it's being used, a data profile that's also being monetized by certain companies. And then that same data profile could be weaponized against you. So how do we do that? We ensure from the earliest age now, I think we've got to include STEM careers and that whole concept of building a career based within the realm of, STEM introduce children to that. We've also got to stop talking about this global north and this global south and who's leading and who's not leading and all the misleading that we're seeing. But we've got to come together as a multicultural world and start to have conversations and start to have the kinds of collaborations that are critical. So maybe for our university project, we can have, the students at the University of Virginia in contact with students in South Africa, in contact with students in India, students in the Caribbean, collaborating and having that measure of intellectual confrontation that is required to really build the kind of technology and the kind of legacy that we want with AI.
Absolutely, I agree with you. And I would take another last question is how do you expose unconscious bias in the organizations that are utilizing or planning to use AI?
Well, it's not about exposing. I think it's about building awareness. And it's about that measure of public education that is required. So I think in any organization, there must be thinking that understands that what we want are ethical technologies. What we want would be an ethical approach to the design, development, and deployment. And to get that, we've got to ensure the people we hire understand the importance of an ethical approach to AI. And we also have got to put our money where our mouth is and ensure that in that design space, we have that measure of diversity. Now, diversity in itself is not going to make the perfect algorithm, but we must also have those checks and balances in place. We must also have that consciousness. We must also have the due diligence and that eternal vigilance. So it's a constant process of learning and relearning, but it's about being open. It's about being open to the understanding that there is a way that is much more imaginative. And that more imaginative way is a way that is equitable, a way that is diverse, and a way that is inclusive.
Thank you. Thank you so
Sure.
much, Renee. And it
Thank you.
has
Thank you.
been